So, hi guys, thank you for joining me for this Facebook Live. This Facebook Live is about control within relationships, whether you are controlling or whether you are controlled. And I'm not suggesting that everybody is in one of those places, but it's quite a common theme, control and controlling in relationships. And we need to kind of just have an idea of what it is and put it into perspective to understand it a little bit. So, when we talk about control, and I've noticed this for a while, is when we want to talk about control in relationships or the subject of it, we don't like to talk about it. We don't like to think too much about it. And I think it's just the nature of control that we fear it somehow. We kind of want to shy away from it. But control is a very real element of a lot of relationships and obviously causes a lot of problems. So it's something that we shouldn't shy away from, and it's something that we should approach and be aware of and deal with it if we can. And when we think about control in relationships, we often think about the worst form of control, and that is usually accompanied by, physical control, physical violence, or worse, psychological abuse, because we all know that psychological abuse causes much more long-term harm than physical abuse. And my advice, if you're in a violent relationship or a seriously deeply hurting psychological abuse, then you need to get out of that relationship, because evidence would suggest that you're going to get trapped there until something really bad happens. So when it comes to control in relationships is kind of one of my, I suppose it's a pet hate of mine, control. So I'm not going to be apologetic for, what I go through today. I'm just going to present research and facts and findings rather than my opinion, because my opinion really doesn't matter. But I can be passionate about control, because so many times people that are controlled, that could get their lives back together and have them good, don't do that because they're controlled, and I think that is just really sad. So let's jump in. So since the 1950s, I guess, studies have shown that there's been a real struggle for differing roles within relationship or power, with women having and getting rightfully more control in relationships, and changing outdated ideas of the roles within relationships. And the introduction, I guess, of the contraception pill for women largely changed the landscape of traditional roles in relationships and marriage, in that it gave women a lot more freedom to the traditional sort of cultural roles that women traditionally played. And the 60s was a time of really questioning roles for women within relationships and within the workplace, etc. And we know that we still wrestle with these things today. But when men and women fight for control over another person, for example, they work in different ways, and these are fundamental biological systems that how they work, in that men will use aggression. So we know that men are aggressive. That's how traditionally hierarchies are formed, that the toughest guy gets to the top of the hierarchy, and that will often involve the use of violence or the meaningful threat of violence, so that they can move up the hierarchy to get to where they need to be. And women are different. Women will not use traditionally and as much physical violence, and women use a tactic that's much different to that, in that what women will do, and women, I'm sure you can relate to this, I don't need to prove this, but what women do, particularly in a woman-to-woman disagreement, should we say, or something where something needs to be resolved, what women will do, they will try and push the opposition down by, for example, using innuendo or gossip, and reputation destruction is the way that women tackle conflict between them. So when two men disagree, there's a framework of negotiation that says we need to stay within this recognized ethical and moral framework, because if not, this could result in physical violence. And if we can't negotiate an agreement, and men resort to violence if not kept within ethical boundaries. And men realize that in confrontation, violence is always an option. But when it comes to a disagreement between men and women, then physical violence is not an option, or it shouldn't be. And so men really don't know how to handle women who like conflict and are controlling. So this means that relationships between partners have different dynamics, and it's different for heterosexual partners as it is for same-sex partners. The different dynamics, and those are biological processes that the brain works on, which we will not get into today. But I want to state that relationships are very complex. I say this often, relationships are very complex, with two very complex individuals coming together, both screwed up, both having demons in different ways, and what might be right for one relationship won't be right for another relationship. And I want to establish that. And with psychology and relationships, there is no apply all rules to everyone because of those personality dynamics. So take that on board with what I'm going to talk to you about. Healthy adult relationships are ones where the control is acknowledged and balanced across the partnership and across the relationship. So relationships that have gone on for a long time, which have elements of control, are difficult to change, as both people within the relationship, they adopt habits and behaviors which become familiar, and they feel really uncomfortable to break, even though you know those habits aren't healthy and they're not good. Those habits are really difficult to break, even if they're creating unhappiness. It's a difficult process. So leaving a marriage of, say, 25 years plus is much more difficult than turning down a fourth date. You know, recognizing control in a fourth date would be great because you can call it a day. And sometimes control is evident very, very early on in two people meeting. But most of the time it isn't, not on a fourth date. If you're on a fourth date and somebody makes signals that, say, for example, they want to spend every minute with you, and you know of the time, and they feel that involved with you, then that's kind of saying, I don't want you to have any freedom. Now, that can be perceived by one of the receiving party as, well, aren't they lovely? They really like me and want to be with me. Well, that's okay there and then, but how's that going to feel in 12 months when they don't like the idea of you spending too much time with your friends or your family? So control often takes, and control takes time to happen, and it manifests in micro manipulations, like slowly boiling a frog in a test tube. You know, the frog warms up slowly and it doesn't notice because it's so slow, and eventually it boils to death and the frog doesn't notice it. And that can happen in a relationship with manipulation and control. It'll just creep up on you unnoticed over time. And people can be controlling for many reasons. And they use a whole toolbox of tactics to control, and they control in many, many different ways. Control usually has, for the controller, a foundation that's built around fear. And it could be fear of loss, or fear of abandonment, or perhaps fear of losing a sense of self-worth. And some people are acting out a sense of emotional fragility and heightened vulnerability, and can have a form of rejection sensitive dysmorphia, which is an oversensitive reaction to being rejected, which causes extreme behaviours to control or want to control others and to reduce a sense of rejection. And that's quite familiar, particularly in men that tend to control. They have these fears, these subconscious fears that cause the behaviour for them to control. Sometimes the emotional manipulation is complex, and it is complex enough that the person who is being controlled actually believes that they themselves are the villain, that they are in the wrong, and they can often feel that they are kind of lucky to have a controlling partner who puts up with their behaviour. And that's how subtle manipulation and control can be, in that you feel that you're in the wrong and you feel lucky that you've got a partner who can put up with those behaviours. But that's reasonably common as well, because the manipulation completely takes over and controls. So, what are some of the things that controlling people do? Okay, so there are many behaviours of control. There's hundreds of behaviours of control, to be honest, and I'm going to touch on the common ones, but as I said, there's many more. Now, the most common reported control condition is isolating the victim from family and friends. If you're in a relationship where you're being controlled, it's generally the first step, and it's subtle and it's manipulative. And it may be that they start to, for example, complain about how long you spend on the phone with your friends, or talk to your brother, or they'll question, well, do you think you should be hanging around with some people because they aren't a good influence on you? And there's a subtle way of destroying your connections and communication through comments, which are very carefully and pointed and timed really, really well. But the goal of that is to strip you of your support network and your strength. Once your support network's out of the way and you've lost your strength, then you're isolated. And that's what a controlling person wants. They don't want you to feel that you've got support, but that you can only rely on them. Now, another early manipulative tactic is to regularly criticize everything that you do, even the small things, the less important things. And this starts small, and someone may try to convince themselves that their partner's criticism is justified, that their partner is just trying to help them out by making them a better person. Part of this is that the controller does not want to hear your opinion of what you've got to say or accept your point of view, and that makes you feel irrelevant. And that's part of that criticism, shrinking you down to take away your strength so you no longer have an opinion, and you start to feel consciously and subconsciously irrelevant and powerless. So the victim may try to reason. So, that's happened to you. You might try and think that it's not such a big deal. If you can't have your say in how you can dress or what you can eat or how you decorate the home, you can convince yourself that you shouldn't take it so personally. And that becomes a way of thinking. So you can begin to see these tactics are about breaking down your confidence and isolating you and causing you to think a certain way that doesn't allow freedom of thought, but cages you. And another tactic is veiled or overt threats against you or against them. So this could be threats to say, I'm leaving, or stopping privileges, or even threats by the controlling person to harm themselves, which actually can be more harmful than the threat of physical violence. It isn't unusual for a partner to feel stuck in a relationship, not through fear for themselves, but for fear that their partner may self-destruct or cause harm for themselves if you were to leave them or to leave them to their own devices. And again, that's complete control and manipulation of sapping the strength out of you, sapping the self-esteem out of you, so that you feel responsible for this manipulating behavior. Very, very clever and very, very subtle. But the controller, the person who is controlling, will use guilt as a tool. And if they can manipulate their partner into constant emotional feelings of guilt about everyday small things, then that means that the controller is pulling the strings. You're a puppet, and the strings are being pulled by your partner, because the partner will do whatever they can to not have those feelings of guilt. So you will do those behaviors that you're asked to do because if you don't do them, you feel guilty. And guilt's a horrible feeling to have. When we feel guilty, it's almost an unbearable sensation. So the guilt is a very powerful emotion to lord over somebody who feels isolated and vulnerable. And this reinforces the control. And this means that that you end up not having an opinion, and you're playing right into the hands of the controller. Again, it's this continual breaking down of your spirit almost, to bring you to a point of complete isolation and almost uselessness, really. But one of the real subtle and imaginative forms, I think, of control is creating a debt that you feel that you owe. So controlling people always, when they at the beginning of a relationship, when two people meet, controlling people come on very strong at the beginning of a relationship with, seemingly romantic gestures and can't do enough for you, and it's all lovely. But many of those gestures are nice gifts, and they create an expectation of a serious commitment to the relationship. Taking you for expensive meals, letting you use the car or home when they're not there. And that's a controlling tactic. And it creates an expectation of you giving something back in return for that, or a sense that you feel indebted to that person because what they've given you or for what they've done for you. Now, very commonly, one of the most difficult tactics for a victim to handle is being teased or ridiculed. That feels really uncomfortable. So what I mean by that is humor and teasing is fundamental in a healthy relationship, and it keeps a relationship on edge in a really healthy way. And that feels okay because we recognize the undertones of that teasing and that humor and that sarcasm. We understand that behavior, and it doesn't feel bad because we'll often give as good as we get with that sarcasm and with that humor and with that teasing. But with controlling teasing, it's mostly one way and it feels very uncomfortable. Emotional control and abuse can be thinly disguised as, well, I was only playing with you, don't take it so personally. And that's a very clever tactic. And the reason why that's clever is because not only does it make you feel undervalued, but you're also being told that you don't have the right to have your own emotions. And that's really clever and really typical of manipulation. So those are a few of the obvious signs of controlling or being controlled. And I'm sure that none of those come as a surprise to you. And if you're watching this video and you've been in a relationship that has had control, you can recognize almost all of those things and relate to them in a really powerful way. And if you're in a relationship now, you'll understand that those are the things that go on for you, because those are the factors. There's lots more factors of manipulation and control. I've just picked out the popular ones and the common ones that you're likely to hear. So if you find that you're in that position and you settle for being controlled, or you settle for controlling, then good luck. If you find yourself in that position and you want to do something about it, then click the link on this video. Make sure you book a call with me and we will discuss a way forward for you. Now, if you recognize that you are a controller and you want to change, then you do the same. You click on that link, you book a call with me, and we can talk through your issues and we can work out a way forward to make some changes for you if that is what you really want. If you recognize yourself as a controller, then that's a really brave and eye-opening thing, because controllers don't recognize a controller. It's a way of being. But if you can see that and you think about it, know for sure that it's affecting your partner's life in a major way. So control is a very complex issue with a lot of variables, but there's always a way forward. So start to treat yourself like you have a life, and like that life is valuable and that you are worth something. And take the steps to put your life right. Every day that goes by is a day wasted. So thank you for listening. The link's on here, the link's on my Facebook page. Ask me some questions, private message me. I'm always happy to have a chat, answer some questions, and hopefully help you think and feel differently about where you are in life to make it better. We can all do that. All of us can do that. Just be courageous enough to do it, and do it as quick as you can, because life's too short. So thank you for listening. Thank you for spending time. Again, a bit doom and gloomy, but the reality of life is that it is doom and gloomy, and we have to face that chaos to be able to put it right. So have a think about your life. I hope you have a great life. I really genuinely love the comments I get that people have got great relationships, and I love that, and I wish it was everybody. But for those of you that it's not, let's make a start at getting your life right for you. Thank you for watching. Thumbs up, thumbs down, comments, negative, positive, whatever suits you. I'll get back to you when I can, and I'll see you on the next live. So thank you.